So we're going to talk about open educational resources today, and it's a really important topic to many of us. And I wanted to start by giving you a definition and to tell you about a resource we've already put in place. What Janine and I decided based on discussions with a lot of people around campus was that we needed to share out what open educational resources are and really sort of capture the depth and breadth of it in a way that was somewhat organized and easy for you to work with. So we went to the library and asked them to let us create a LibGuide. Come on in, Linda. So we asked the library to let us create a LibGuide on open educational resources, and this is what pops up when you first come in. So I wanted to read the definition of what an open educational resource is, and then we're going to show you some examples and explain why it's important. So Merlot calls it a mechanism and system for sharing resources. It's also digitized materials offered freely and openly for educators, students, and self-learners to use and reuse for teaching, learning, and research. Typically, they have attributes as follows. The access is free, and by free, that means no cost. Sometimes people need that a little further defined. They're liberally licensed, which means free from restrictions on use, reuse, modifications, and redistribution. And we'll talk about what some of the rules are and what Creative Commons refers to. Liz, I believe you would ask me in another session. So I've got a video I'm going to show you that talks about OER, but it also ties in the Creative Commons licensing piece that may be important to some of you. And most open educational resources are for education. They're usually for teaching and learning, and almost always they're digital, or they were print at some time and then they were scanned in. I see a lot of elementary school lessons that used to be on sheets and then got scanned into PDFs that they'll now share out that you can print and use to work with young learners, for example. So that's what open educational resources are. So let's talk about why it's important. You're going to see here a little infographic I made. It was my very first time creating an infographic. And basically an infographic is a way to visually share complex information in a way that's as simple as possible. So I thought OER had a lot of complexities to it, so I wanted to come up with a way to share with people what it is and why it's important. So my first statistic is that 28% of student tuition at the University of South Florida goes solely to student textbooks. Not only that, the average cost for textbooks for California college students is $1,300. Between 1986 and 2004, textbook prices rose 186% in the U.S., which was double the rate of inflation. And at some community colleges, textbooks comprise up to 75% of the total cost for students. I taught 10 years ago an intro to Macromedia Dreamweaver, and the textbook at that time was $80, and I used 2 chapters in it and taught the rest live with the students. So you can start to see where some of the discrepancy is. So you have traditional textbooks. So I have a little analogy for you. And to me that equals a lot of student debt and putting the cart before the horse. And so the text tends to dictate context and curriculum for many people. That's not for everyone, I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is for a lot of people, especially when I was younger, starting out to first come to teach, I had to teach with the textbook I was given, and here was the syllabus, and 3 out of the 10 chapters in one book, and then 2 out of another book. That was a little disconcerting to me. Now, the first kind of OER that people think of is often open textbooks. And they are a mixed bag. They're pretty decent, but the text is moderately dictates the context and curriculum. So the open materials, like in the form of a textbook, are good, but you would want to pick and choose what you'd want. So if someone called it an entire textbook, I would still consider it one resource that I would pick and choose from. And that's where some of the licensing comes into play that we'll discuss in just a bit. Now, open educational resources tied to course objectives is really where we're seeing the development of this going, and where you can really have your cart with your little golden egg in it. So curating open educational resources now, and then to meet specific objectives for a course, allows you to really create some rich and engaging materials for your students, but it also allows you to free up time in your classroom to do things that may be more relevant to you. So if you're repeating a lot of the same things in a class, why not create a lecture capture like Walter does, where he can say, go refer to this outside of class, or use it as a supplement to things going on, and then you can go and pick and choose what you want the students to use. And let's say you have a lecture on information literacy. I'm going to show you an example in a minute where you can freely grab some information literacy resources, have the students review them outside of class to either complement what you're doing or in place of something that if you think it's really good, and then your students come in, and then you can then spend more time doing what you want with the hands-on learning with the students. So a lot of the open educational resources out there, if you can tie them to specific curricular objectives for a class or your discipline, you can then use that to accentuate what you're doing. It may not be as good as your materials, or you may find things that are, hey, this really fits a void here for me, and then you can pull it in. But it gives you a lot more freedom to pick and choose as you will. So I want to show you a video now. I found it this morning, and I thought it was really, really an excellent introduction to OER, how to use them, and it introduces you to the licensing piece really well. And I also put that in the LibGuide as soon as I found it. So I'm going to play it for you. Hopefully the sound will work.
With so many new tools and ways to use technology, open educational resources, or OER, have become an important supply from which to draw when developing instructional content. OER are educational materials produced by one party that are licensed to be shared freely and at no cost by others. Let's examine the process of finding and using OER, and how to handle the complications that can arise when combining materials with different licenses. There are many open licenses, but Creative Commons licenses are the ones we will be working with here. So how do you go about finding and using OER? Let's watch Michelle as she develops a chapter for an open textbook on metabolism. Michelle has been teaching metabolism for years, so she has already developed the text of the chapter from her notes. But she needs some illustrations, specifically of the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain. She'd also like to find some exercises to accompany the text. There are many places to find OER, such as Flickr CC, OER Commons, Connections, Internet Archive, or Open Michigan. Michelle goes to Flickr CC at flickr.com/Creative Commons. That brings her to a collection of all the Flickr images that have Creative Commons licenses. She quickly finds the images she's looking for. Both with CC BY licenses. For exercises, she logs into the Orange Grove, Florida's digital repository where a wide range of OER are available. Here she searches for electron transport chain and turns up some exercise test questions also licensed to CC BY. Because there are no restrictions on these images or exercises, Michelle is free to modify them to suit her needs. She resizes and crops the images and writes captions for them. Then for each image, she provides the specific Creative Commons license with a link back to its license deed. Next, she writes the creator's name, linking back to the Flickr site where she found the image. She also adds some references to the images in her text. She then adds the exercises at the end, removes two that do not belong in her chapter, provides attribution to the creator, and links back to the resource. Then she uses the accessibility check utility in Microsoft Word, which spots content that may pose challenges for persons with disabilities. When Michelle saves her book, she notices the metadata text fields at the bottom of the Save As window. Her name is already listed as author. She could add more names if she had co-authors. She enters the title and subject, then several tags that describe the content of her work. When Michelle clicks Save, the metadata is embedded in the document. Finally, she adds a Creative Commons license. Because the other content she is using has CC BY licenses, the least restrictive license available, she is free to choose the license she wants. She goes to the Creative Commons page to choose a license. She answers a few questions, and her license is selected automatically. She then fills in some information to help others provide proper attribution for her work, and the chooser automatically generates text and code for her document. She copies the text and pastes it onto the first page of her chapter. A job well done, Michelle.
Thanks.
All right, I'm going to stop that there. There's several more examples that they go through, but the point is that once you go and find something, you want to check the Creative Commons license on it to see how you can use it. Where they go and talk about adding metadata to your own stuff and then citing other things, you have to do that based on what the license is, and it's very simple. So I'm actually going to show you what that looks like instead of watching the rest of that example.
What were those sites? Did you catch them? Flickr?
There was Flickr, there's OER Commons, and then there's others. But I'm glad you asked, because on that LibGuide page, there's a OER repositories link. And then under repository, I list out basically in order the ones that I like the best. There are many, and I put as many as I could on there, but I kind of ordered them in the way that I found the most useful. The first one here is OER Commons, and it's supported by Hewlett-Packard. It has an alliance with 120 different organizations, and then most of their materials have pretty liberal Creative Commons licenses. So let's use that as an example, because why not? I guess I could go off script. I can prove I can. If you go to OER Commons, most of these sites are set up like library research pages now. You literally just go to the page and search for what you're looking for, and it'll pop up everything related to it. So you don't have to do much in terms of search complexity. So let's say we wanted to learn more about information literature. It's one of the featured higher ed resources right now. If I click on that link, I could have searched for information literacy, but I go here, and what it does is it brings me to a description of the resource. So for this one, it's humanities. It's from the University of Notre Dame. The level is community college, lower division college, possibly upper division. And it'll show me the Creative Commons license right here, which says attribution, non-commercial, share alike. Attribution means you have to say where you got it from and who created it, if that information is available. Non-commercial means you can't sell it to make money. And then share alike means that you can share it with whoever you want. And it'll always have this little Creative Commons license here. And then on the right, if someone had reviewed it and rated it, you could go there and see what other educators have to say. And that gets really handy. And a lot of people tend to stick to the ones that their peers at other places go in and say, hey, this is good stuff, or this is known bad. Do not go to there. So let's try a different one then. Contemporary health concerns. Oh, that sounds fascinating. It was made by Judy Baker at Foothill College. This one is not rated. It's a course that addresses contemporary health concerns, and it will inform students about behavior choices and identify preconceived ideas. So let's click View Resource and see if it brings it up.
And Nick, when you say you can't use it, you can't sell it, but you can use it in a class that's being sold for credit.
Yes. It just means that you can't make a profit. You can't package it to sell to the public. If you were going to use it, you can use it in an educational institution. That's a great point, because every way we would use it, we're making a profit from the students paying their tuition, you're right. So, but within education, it's okay. But if I wanted to say, I wanted to take this contemporary health concerns and make an app about it and just sell it, they would go, no, you owe us all the money you're making, and we're probably going to slap you on the wrist a little bit. So on here, you have the contemporary health concerns. Judy Baker, PhD, the Dean of Foothill Global Access at Foothill College, is the author of this content. It lists out her objectives, and it looks like she's got 11 modules to meet these 13 objectives. If I click on one of the modules, we can see what she's got. She's got 4 lessons in this module. One about health and disease, one about culture, one about leading causes of death, one about 3 levels of promotion and disease prevention. If we go to lesson 1, let's see. She's got some resources here that link out to other pages. It looks, these links don't look like they're going to work, but let's see if they do. Okay, they do. So there's some text content here that she links out to. So this is one example of a type of resource you can get. When you use OER Commons, if you create like a little account with them, they'll always have a bar at the top. You can save the ones you like to your account. You can also rate them and then comment on them, and then all of these sites will let you go to like a Facebook or Twitter and distribute this stuff from there. So that's one example. OER Commons I like a great deal because it's very easy to find resources from them, and I can't say that of all of the resources I've used. The second one here is Connections. It began at Rice University, has 20,000 modules. There's open access software in there you can use as well. So I'll bring that up to show you what they look like. You can create your own account here too, and you can sort either by topics or popularity. You can even create your own content and upload it to any of these repositories, by the way. And that's all free. So I'm going to look at most popular from last week. And the first one that pops up is called Minor Keys and Scales. Let's take a look at that. This was created by Catherine Schmidt-Jones. You can see it was liked on Facebook 48 times. Talks about music in the minor key, minor scales. And so there's a lot of information here that you can then use, and it should at some point show the Creative Commons license. And then when you see that, you can click on the Creative Commons license, and it links you to Creative Commons website. So when you create something that you want to share out with other people and put a Creative Commons license on it, you just go to the creativecommons.org website, which there's a link to it from the LibGuide. And what you do is you enter information about your resource that you want to share out, and then it creates the image and then the code so that it will link as soon as you add it to a web page or something. So you don't have to do any legwork or anything technical. You just put the image below and say where you got it from. And in this case, you can share it and you can remix it. And you can use it for commercial gain. So if you wanted to, say, take these images, you are able to use it on a work for hire. So that is Connections. I'm going to show you one more, and these are people that I've actually spent a lot of time working with over the years. Merlot. They started at Cal State. It's a free and open collection of resources. They have editorial boards within 22 disciplines that manage the collection. So they're a little more like referee, kind of the way journals are. And so people like them for that reason, so you don't have to worry about dealing with the riffraff, for lack of a better way of putting it. So if we go in here, I'll pick a new discipline. Let's go with sociology. So if I go to the sociology page, I can see some of the things they have. They have learning materials. I'll click on the first one, it's anthropology. And then there's 127 resources that show up right away. You're going to see on the right that it gives you some information. There's a compass here. I don't know what the compass means, but it makes me want to know. Merlot's strategy for institutions' academic support services. I don't know what that means related to the compass, and at this point I don't really care, but I do see that this Elixir Student Video Projects in Anthropology Education, created at the University of Pennsylvania, has a peer review. So I'm going to go to peer review, or click on the link and see what they have to say about it. And then you'll see down here, you've got the quality of the content was excellent with just the right mix of video, text, and supplemental information and guidelines. And then it goes down and it gives you a good sense of what other people think of it. So now if I click back on the link for the materials, it brings you to a page about the learning materials. It tells you who the authors are, who submitted it, gives you a description, and then it gives you the Creative Commons licensing. So it says anyone can use it. It's got a cross through the dollar bill sign, so that means you can't sell it. And then you can not create derivatives of this work. So you're allowed to use it, but you're not allowed to remix it, is what they often call it. So let's see if I can go to this resource. It should be right in front of my face. Here it is, go to material. So there'll be a link that says go to material. It's good for you to see this, because the first couple times I've visited some of these sites, I'd see the link, I'd see the page for it, and I'd be like, well, now how do I get it? So here it's going to load a video, and you can use this in class. So let's see.
Students basically panic when they first hear the assignment. It was new for me because I've never done any sort of video project like this before, and I think it was really an effective way to sort of apply what I learned into the civil problem.
But the fact that it can be so, one, collaborative because people share their projects, but also interactive with their friends outside the class made it a really fun activity.
Students learn that they have a lot more creativity than they ever gave themselves credit for. I get statements like, at first I did.
So we've got a nice collection of videos that this teacher uses for talking about nurturing student creativity tied to anthropology. So, and you're usually going to find people at a wide array of different institutions. I mean, it runs the gamut. It'll be a community college you never heard of, it'll be Harvard, it will be everywhere in between. And that's one of the things I love about it, is you can kind of go on a scavenger hunt and you get access to good people and great ideas without having to pay them money. That I like. So let me show you some other things here. So on this OER LibGuide, I just want to point out, I found some articles related to open educational resources that can give you some greater context if you want to learn more about them. We have OER videos. I have the last one here I added this morning when I found it is Creative OER and Combined Licenses. That was a really good one. There's a video here on licensing OER in addition to that was made by the Creative Commons. It's very good. I'm not going to waste your time showing it to you because it just reiterates what you've already seen. But there are also some videos that may just be relevant to you. A lot of people only know of open educational resources because of the Khan Academy, and one of their videos is in here, and where the Salman Khan talks about using video to reinvent education. Peter Norvig talks about the 100,000 student classroom and the giant class he did at Stanford. And then there's some other things, Jimmy Wales, who created Wikipedia. And then this really interesting video on the 4 principles of openness. It's by Don Tapscott. It's a TED Talk that's really kind of interesting, and you may like it. Under open, I've got just some things to think about when you think about what it means to be open. The Dan Tapscott video, he talks about collaboration, transparency, sharing, and empowerment. But two things I wanted to note here that I found really interesting when I first started doing research on this is that Washington State Community College System, they took their top 42 courses and made open textbooks for each one of them with the goal of making the average cost not go above $30. So for 42 classes throughout the state, doesn't matter where you take it, the textbook's $32. And we're talking classes where there were several $100 textbooks. They not only did that, but they're taking the next 38 most popular courses and making those available within the next year. That I found really fascinating because they're just doing a whole textbook kind of thing. And my thinking is tied mostly around, why not tie what you need to specific curricular objectives. So if you have a class that has 6 objectives, find a lot of open educational resources that will meet those objectives, see how it complements what you're doing, and then implement it. And it also allows you to do a lot of it outside of class. So the thing I love the most about these things is your students can do this anytime, anywhere, but then if I do that in my class, when my students come to work with me, I know that they have this, so I can ask them to do some of this before they get to me, so we can problem solve, work on projects, and go out and apply what we're doing so that maybe they'll retain it and get better jobs as a result and be better human beings. So that I just really love about this stuff. The last example I'll mention is the California State University. They're doing something very similar. And they have this, they call it their Affordable Learning Solutions Initiative. Janine and I went to the Sloan C conference, and California State University is trying to digitize everything. And they're trying to make open educational resources the same way that the Washington State system is doing. So the Washington State Community College system is making a huge name for themselves right now just because of this initiative. Whereas it's just like probably any other community college system in any state, but they're going around the conferences saying, we just decided to stop some of that nonsense. And they talk about, if you ever get a chance to see them speak about it, how they are trying to use that to respond to the lack of federal funds that they get, because that decreases all the time. And also that student issue is usually the worst in the community college system because those students are the ones who need the money the most and yet often pay the most, or comparable to what a much more expensive school would be like. So you can kind of see why they would do it, and it all makes sense, but they're like one of the exemplars of where you want to go with something like that. So that is the LibGuide in a nutshell. Is there any questions or things that you would like me to talk about related to them? Shoot.
How long has this been around? I mean, I don't know anything about it.
Now, Merlot has been around for about 10 years or so, maybe a little longer. See, originally, the open educational resources vendors, they didn't have a lot of content and or the websites were really clunky. You remember how research databases and libraries, you have to go, I got to open up ERIC, and then I've got to open up EBSCOhost, then I've got to open up the other one, and then I've got to compare them all, and you still don't find what you're looking for. And now you can go to our library homepage and type in physics, and it'll show you everything related to physics in every resource database they have access to. That's why people, I believe, didn't really get it or go to those resources sooner. One, there wasn't that many that were of great quality, and two, the ease of access and use wasn't that great. You could say that about most instructional technology as a whole. It's just in the last several years started to get to a point where it's easy enough for someone to use it to complement what they're doing instead of having to have a PhD in Elmo. Now it's getting a little better. But yeah, that's really, they've been around for a little bit. The SUNY Learning Network, one of my first jobs was as an online course developer in the SUNY system, and I was the multimedia instructional designer for the SUNY Learning Network. And we used to work with people like Merlot to try and create resources. But it was back when you just had, they didn't have digital camcorders yet. They were just, the big thing at that time is they went to the smaller sets to record on. We're like, oh, look at these tapes, awesome. But it was very hard to edit. It was very hard to piece things together and get people to be willing to do this stuff. And now there's so much out there in the market, like that's all free for us, especially educators. It's just wonderful, and you can easily just go and find this and use it basically however you like. And then once you find people who make things that you're interested in, I've met some of these people at some of these conferences who make resources, and I say, hey, oh cool, I'll go check out your stuff, and I'll really like it. So it's an interesting way to join a community too, you know. Oops, sorry.
After you find what you want on an OER resource, you just go into Blackboard and put the link there? Is that what you do? How do you get it from the OER to the Blackboard? Do you have to download all this stuff?
Great question. It depends on what the resource is. Some of them, most of the ones we just saw were videos that were already online. You could just post a link to that video and then put the attribution. There are some that are actual physical documents you can download and use, and then you can upload those into Blackboard. But if it says you can use it however you want, you can copy and paste right into a new item in Blackboard and put it there. You could even print it out as a PDF and add it in if you wanted to. But most of the ones we just saw were actual links to other sites and things like that. So you could just link to that stuff to make it easier for yourself.
Thank you.
You know? Go ahead.
I've been using Merlot for a long time because they've got a real strong communication sciences and disorders branch in it. And to answer to Catherine's question, sometimes I just include it in my PowerPoint and I go to that site. Sometimes it becomes an experiment that I'll use in a lab with a student. So I'm just taking advantage of somebody else's great idea to help supplement when I become kind of dry. I'm really impressed by how they have reviewers. Now, I know many of the folks that are doing the reviewing, and that really gives me a lot of comfort going there, as opposed to some of the other sites that I know that it's been reviewed by other people who are teaching. I got two questions. Flickr.com is just images?
Flickr, yeah, Flickr's just images.
And some of them you have to pay for and some are free. Am I right about that?
You are, yes. So Flickr, it's the word Flickr, but without the E. If you go to Flickr, if you want their free stuff, you have to go to Flickr/Creative Commons. And then it'll show you, based on Creative Commons licenses, all the images you can grab. And I love how they do it, because you can sort by the licenses. I don't know if there's a link to this on the LIT guide yet, but there will be before today is over. So I'll put that in there. But yeah, this is really cool. So you can use these however you like, which is nice because for graduate studies, we've had to go out and pay some of those pay services to use images for advertising and to make some of our courses better looking.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question is, I use a lot of government documents, and I assume that that would also call that open educational resource. I mean, it's not using one of these systems, but they're available off of government websites.
I don't think you'd have any problem using them. The only thing I've ever seen is that people will link to it and say where they got it, and that's the extent of it. You know, if they put the Creative Commons thing on there, then you have to honor it. But if they don't and it's freely available, you're allowed to use it however you want, because if the government puts it freely out there, we all have the right to use it. And I remember in the SUNY system, we were representing SUNY, and we went to this meeting on copyright, and it was a long time ago now, so the rules have changed. But if you look at copyright, you know, and as an educational institution, most of them could get away with whatever they wanted because the state couldn't sue themselves. So the state couldn't go after the state for making the mistake. So in the SUNY system, they said pretty much do whatever you want within education. And as long as you're not ripping somebody off and it's not, you know, images, music, or film, you know, it's pretty liberal for us. And you remind me of a really excellent point about the quality of some of these resources to liven things up. And then I often will share out other videos and tutorials to do things because I know my teaching style isn't the best for everyone. So I'm like, if I can find another resource that will say the same thing but in a different way, I think, wow, you know, I'm sort of attending to the different learning styles, and maybe they don't like casual Nick trying to communicate this. Maybe they need it more hard and fast, you know, or maybe they want more of a narrative to it. So it's always really cool that you can provide them this real breadth of information, and they can sort of pick and choose what they want, and that fits with our students' abilities nowadays. Like, they have access to everything, so they can get what they want when they want it. So I'd love to cater to that as much as I can. And, you know, and especially as you go up the levels, you know, graduate students, I teach graduate education courses. I have some people who just don't like how I do live sessions with them, because I'll often make them do work in real time, and they're like, that scares me. I want to be able to do it outside of class, you know, and it's like, no, you got to do it with me. But, you know, it's you try and pad that as much as reasonably possible. They still have stupid classes. Any other questions, or?
Just a note about the LibGuide, we would love any input. Nick will post whatever you send to him on the LibGuide. I think you can post in comments, but it would be nice if we could do official posts if you have things, resources you want to put up on the LibGuide. That's why we were there with it, because Gretchen kept sending me these great articles, and I kept filing them away in a folder. So we're kind of trying to make that a place to collect all this great stuff that's out there for the institution.
Yeah, and our president asked,
Oh, yeah.
she wants us to be using open educational resources. She wants us to use free and good materials that rival anything that we could produce to try and be more conscious of what we're spending in, because she knows that that's the direction a lot of educators are moving in. And I had all this research collected and had nowhere to put it. So, and we were coming across all these great articles, and we find that all the time with things. And you know, it was like, oh, we'll talk about it, but
Right.
just between
Forget
Janine
about
and I, it's not very helpful to you.
So that's the LibGuide for everybody.
Yeah, so if you want to add to it, subtract from it, you have at it. But I will add the Flickr link today. And if that is all, I want to thank you for coming, and have a wonderful day.